Hi there, and welcome back to our Starsector pirate campaign. So at the end of the last episode, we encountered a moderately sized hegemony patrol, and afterward we're presented with the opportunity to salvage a Dran and a Legion. And of course we will take both of those ships, though I don't think we'll be keeping the Legion, and I'll explain why as we make our way back to Garnier. Comparing the Legion to the other capital ships available in vanilla Starsector, the Legion really comes out as a jack of all trades. So it has some hangar bays, but not as many as the Astral. It can tank a little bit, but not as much as the Paragon. And it has some decent firepower, but not as much as an Onslaught. And it definitely doesn't have the speed or maneuverability of a Conquest. Now, that isn't to say it's a bad ship. I would still put it a step above the capital ship options available to the Pathers and the Pirates. But our current fleet composition is really focused on being nimble, being able to split apart enemy formations and then isolate and eliminate key targets. And the Legion would introduce an element that really goes against all of that. Basically, we would be adding a huge anchor to our fleet. While the Legion could certainly draw a lot of enemy attention, it doesn't have the mobility to get itself out of trouble, or the defenses to simply slug it out with another capital ship, so it would be stuck defending it pretty much any time it's on the field. So as much as it pains me to have to get rid of our first capital ship, I do think it's a better decision to simply sell it off here at Garnier. Alright, so we got rid of the Legion, but we are going to keep the Dram, and I've equipped that with some hull mods to increase its cargo and fuel capacity. I've also used the 2 skill points that we had to get containment procedures and field repairs. Containment procedures should help us on the logistical side by reducing fuel consumption and crew losses, while field repairs is really a key skill for us, as it can remove a demod from one of our damaged ships once per month. Thus far, we've been restoring most of our salvaged ships, but as time goes on, that's going to become less and less economically feasible, as the cost of restoring cruisers and capital ships tends to run into the hundreds of thousands. So we'll probably continue to restore any smaller ships, but try to rely on field repairs to take care of the demods on any salvaged capital ships that we pick up. And with all that out of the way, I've decided to head to Sindria. In the last episode, we expanded our fleet considerably, took a few battles to test our capabilities, and the Legion just sort of dropped into our lap by chance. But now I want to take a much more focused approach on expanding our fleet. So you may recall that I mentioned I didn't want to use the Legion because it doesn't really fit into our overall fleet composition. But there is another capital ship that I think would work much better for us, the Conquest. And nobody has more conquest than the Sindrian Diktat, so we've basically come to Sindria to hunt for a conquest. Of course, this first fleet that we've run into doesn't have a conquest in it, but it does have an eagle, and I wouldn't be opposed to getting one of those either. As usual, I'm going to have the Omen follow me while the rest of the frigates form up on the Shrike and the Enforcer, except for the Brawler, which I trust to be able to get itself out of trouble when needed. The way this fleet fanned out, I'm matched up against the Monderer at the moment, but I'd really prefer not to waste my time with that if possible. I'm going to negotiate myself into a better position against this Sunder and hopefully take it out before the Eagle can interfere. And while I'm doing that, let's see if I can get the rest of the fleet to do something useful. This Sunder is built a lot like our Hammerhead in that it can do a lot of damage very quickly, but also much more flux intensive, so it fluxed out way before we did. And now we have a pocket of space to deal with this Monitor. While we are built to deal different types of damage, we're definitely much more suited to dealing with heavy armor, and that really shows against something that has fortress shields like this Monitor. Against a purely high-tech fleet, I might consider exchanging one of the assault chain guns for a heavy machine gun, but against a balanced composition like this, it's probably not worthwhile. Let's see if the rest of the fleet have kept themselves out of trouble. This poor Shrike still doesn't have any decent weapons to work with. Hopefully we can strip down one of these Sunders for something more useful. And now that everything else is out of the way, let's get this cruiser. Unlike the Dominator, the Eagle is quite maneuverable and difficult to flank. Fortunately, this one is heavily anti-armor focused, so we can comfortably go face to face against it. And for some reason it's also decided to turn around. It's not going to help it, but I'll take it. And unfortunately there's nothing interesting to salvage here. The vigilance is fine, but not worth a story point. Let's take the supplies and move on. Well, this patrol is a conquest, but it also has quite a lot of cruisers. I'd much prefer something a little bit smaller. This other patrol is perfect, but unfortunately it's also behind the much bigger one. Let's see if we can separate them a little bit. The smaller patrol is starting to take the lead now. That's a good sign. And now they've disappeared. Oh, and we have company. I'd really like to avoid this other patrol if possible, since I don't want to fight two fleets back to back, but it looks like we're gonna have to here. I'd like to be able to go into the next fight with enough CR to be able to retreat and re-engage if needed, so let's try to finish this quickly. We'll do the same thing as last time, with the Omen on me and everyone else just taking targets as they become available. One thing I've been doing that I probably should have mentioned earlier is that I'm setting all of my weapon groups to auto-fire, then I'm just setting my manual targeting to weapon group 3, which actually isn't one of our assigned weapon groups, so essentially every weapon is auto-firing. The Hammerhead is built to be able to handle all the weapons firing at once, and we usually operate at such short ranges that I'm pretty comfortable with letting the AI handle the targeting. These Squall missiles are going to be a problem for us in this fight. Just like the fighters that the Legion had, they're going to be a constant source of damage pressure that's going to force us to keep our shields up even at very long range. Fortunately, this Griffin is otherwise not that dangerous, so we might just hug his face and try to take him out here. Alright, a little bit risky, but it looks like the gamble paid off. With the Squall missiles off the board, the rest of this fight should go a lot more smoothly. This Enforcer is nearly overloaded, so let's go for that next. You may have noticed I gave the Enforcer a bit of a tap there, just to move it further away from the remaining Griffin. Anytime a ship's engines are disabled, you can actually move it around fairly easily by simply crashing into it. And even with its engines on, as long as your ship has more thrust, you can actually corral enemy ships pretty effectively by just pushing against them. This fight is actually a pretty good demonstration of the sorts of issues that we would encounter ourselves if we had decided to keep the Legion. You can see that the Griffins really didn't move a whole lot after they engaged at the start of this fight. Meanwhile, all of these smaller frigates all spread out and got picked off one by one, and the Griffins were just too slow and too far away to offer any support. The Legion would have presented many of the same problems for our fleet, except it's even slower, so the only time our ships would really have benefited from having it around would be when they're right next to it, but then they wouldn't have any of the flexibility to go out to seek and destroy targets. You can see that I'm occasionally giving this monitor a bit of a push just to make sure that it maintains distance from the Griffin, and that alone is enough to keep the Griffin completely out of the fight until we're ready to take it on. We do need to be a little bit careful here, as the Sabo Reaper Torpedo combination can be pretty deadly, but fortunately we have the rest of our fleet to back us up, so we don't need to engage this one-on-one. Alright, I think we dealt with that pretty expediently. I think we have enough CR left to go straight into the next fight. And I'm gonna hold off on taking a Griffin here. I think if we salvaged one, we wouldn't have enough crew left for the rest of the fleet. We could take another monitor though. Yeah, I think I'll do that. It won't be able to help us out immediately, but it's a decent long-term investment. And we'll check that debris field one more time just in case. Alright, let's catch that conquest before any more reinforcements come in. Alright, and we'll go in solo first, just like we did against the Legion. And we won't have any fighters to deal with, so hopefully it'll be easier to pick off some of the smaller targets. Immediately I'm seeing hypervelocity drivers on the Falcon, which is a bit of a mixed blessing. On one hand, their range is really quite annoying, but they also fire slowly enough that if we wanted to, we could turn off our shields between each shot to vent a little bit of flux. And the damage is low enough that if we catch them out in a one-on-one situation, I think we could win pretty handily. We just need to be careful not to get our engines disabled by one of these salamander missiles. As I mentioned before, losing thrust control is one of the main reasons why I might lose a flagship, and that's particularly true when I'm operating solo like this, as I don't have a fleet to send in to save me. This fight would also be a lot harder if we had to deal with something that could outflank us, like a wolf or a phase ship. Fortunately, there's nothing like that here, so it's much easier to make sure that only enemies stay away from our squishy bits. You can see I'm trying to get the salamanders to impact on my shields here. Basically, I'm just turning in one direction and then suddenly changing to the other direction, trying to get them to either overshoot or undershoot the gap. And I'm just going to back off a little bit here. It doesn't do us much good trying to engage all three of these guys at once. Alright, this looks much better. And once again, using the target to block enemy fire. And now let's see if we can get these enforcers one by one. Oh, and we just picked up the conquest on sensors. This is about to get interesting. I don't want to press my luck, but if we can take down the enforcer, that'll eliminate any distractions for our reinforcements, which would be a huge plus. There we go. Alright, I think it's time. Let's send in the cavalry. And everyone on the conquest. Excellent. Okay, things should be pretty simple from here. Funnily enough, we're actually doing much worse now that we have the rest of the fleet involved. Everyone's so eager that we're just tripping all over each other to get at them. Okay, I think we finally managed to isolate this hammerhead. And there's our poor useless Shrike just doing somersaults in the background. Well, that was a little bit too close for comfort. And just like before, I think we'll save the Eagle until the end. This thing is a bit distracted by our enforcer, so contrary to what I said before, we might actually be able to flank it. And we're done. Let's see if we got any goodies. Yeah, I already have a dram, so I'm not about to chase that one down. Nothing in standard. Aha! But we can get it for a story point, and I think that's what we're gonna do. So 1 conquest, and I think we'll take the Falcon as well. So that's our first cruiser, and the first capital ship that we're gonna keep. And before we forget, let's check for any more salvage. Alright, now where is Umbra? Okay, we're basically on the other side of the system, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and transverse jump to get straight to Umbra through hyperspace. Okay, that's a big patrol. Let's hope they don't go after us. Looks like they have someone else in their mind at the moment. And I think we made it. So next time we'll start off by outfitting our new ships, and we'll see where we want to go from there. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you out there in the sector. Oh, hi, you're still here. Well, this is awkward. How about I show you something then? So, while I was editing this episode, I got to thinking about that first larger Centurion fleet that we decided not to fight. And I wondered, what if we had actually decided to take that fight instead? So I made a backup save file, and in it I got rid of all the ships that we acquired during the episode, namely the Conquest, the Falcon, and the Monitor. And then I went looking for that first Centurion fleet that we passed on, and I happened to stumble across it in hyperspace. So think of this as a what-if scenario, something that may have happened if we had made slightly different decisions. In terms of the main playthrough, this fight never happened, but it was quite a challenge, and I thought I'd share it with you now. You should know that I didn't record any commentary for this fight, but wanted to share for those of you interested in seeing a fight where I really did have to use all of the tricks. So without further ado, here is the larger Centurion fleet. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you again when we pick back up on the main playthrough.